Hello, this is my metaphor experiment. All right, so I'm gonna kick it right off. So the four areas of my life that I chose to focus on were finances, education, work, and family. The reason I chose these four were because they seem to be the most prominent um, in my projects in the past, and I feel like they're going to be the most important to me as I move beyond college. So first off, family. I used the metaphor of the bricklayer or of the builder. The reason that I used this metaphor was because I felt like it was really important that in my family life I'm capable of building constantly on relationships with my family members. I like that he's laying bricks because I feel like that's really indicative of like a strong foundation and just building a really powerful, strong community, which I think is really what the bricklayer here is doing, is building something that's strong and foundational. And also, what I really liked about it was masonry seems like it's kind of a careful form of building. When I'm building relationships with my family members, I don't want it to be like just slapping things together in order to just check off the list of, oh, I've taken my kids to the park, I've helped my kids with homework, I spent time with my wife tonight. I don't want it to be like that where I'm just kind of slapping these relationships together. I want it to be that I'm intentional about my relationships that I build with my family members. For work, I use the metaphor of an ox. The reason I really like the ox as a metaphor is because when I was in elementary school, I learned that oxen during the Oregon Trail were really strong and could often pull heavy loads, but they got distracted really easily, and so they had to use blinders on them. And that, I feel like that's a lot like me. I feel like I'm really good at helping people out with projects when they need help, as long as I'm given direction, clear and concise direction. And when I've been given kind of just a space to work in, I don't get as much done. And I do like to be creative, but I also like to have some kind of confines, or at least have some kind of idea of what I'm doing before I go into it, if that makes sense. The other metaphor I used was the bookworm for education. The reason I use that is because the bookworm, I like the idea of it because they're just constantly trying to ingest information and knowledge. And I want that to be my life after graduation. Is that I'm not just, okay, well, I've gotten my degree, okay, so I'm done with school, check that off the list. I want it to be that I am constantly focused on learning more and understanding more and listening more, and that's really important to me. For finances, I chose a little picture of the little mendicant beggar guy. I really liked him because he seemed like he was kind of living within his means. Like, he's got his clothes on his back, and that's all he's got, and he's kind of okay with that. He seems like he's a little bit down in the dumps, but that's okay. I like the idea of what Jerry LIBA talked about at plenary, where he said, he even after him and his wife were making enough money, he lived within his means for a very long time, and that made it so that he could start a college fund for his kids. They could go on better vacations, and he's got a great savings for when he retires. And I feel like that's really important, is that I start taking care of my finances now, and so in the future, my wife and I have a stronger base financially, so that we can do whatever we want, and that's oftentimes going to be ministry and things like that. But also, what he said in plenary is no one would remember the Great Samaritan or the Good Samaritan if he didn't have any money, and I think that's a really good indication. I was kind of trying to think of another idea for finances. I couldn't. I originally had maybe the idea of a monk, but that seems kind of solitary, and I didn't want that to be kind of what I took into my family life. I feel like that kind of affected my family metaphor as well. And so I decided not to go with that. I decided to stick with more of a beggar, and I was okay with the idea of that. And then for my ultimate vision, I chose the family room or the living room. The reason I chose that is because the living room is a multi-purpose area. It can serve in so many different capacities. It serves first and foremost for the family's comfort. So the family has a place to unwind at the end of the day and spend time in relationship with one another and fellowship with one another. You take your friends in the living room and you spend time with them when they come over. You wrestle your kids on the floor in the living room. You play board games in there. But then it's also a place where if you have to take your homework home with you, you can take it in the living room and sit on the couch and spend time with your family while you're doing work. It's a time where you can sit down with your spouse and budget. My wife and I have done that so many different times. It's a place where you can sit down and read a book or sit down and listen to a podcast, whatever is your form of understanding and learning. And then it's also, like I said, it's a good place to build family relationships. So I feel like that tied all four of these well together. And the way that I feel like that sticks into my life is that I don't want my life to be focused on one specific thing. I don't want to just be a workaholic. I don't want to just be a guy who sits and tries to learn all the time, or a guy that's constantly focused on finances, or a guy that's only focused on family and none of these other things that maybe support family. And so I feel like the family room was a really good way of tying that all together. Over time, I expect these maybe to change in some ways. I don't know how for right now. Maybe the builder will change. I could see the bookworm changing in some way because there are so many different ways of learning. And I feel like that's maybe my primary way of learning right now is just reading and taking in information. But maybe in the future, like the counselor or something like that, something a little bit more relational. Because if I'm stepping into ministry, I really want that to be more important to me, that I'm focusing on listening. And I feel like that's a good way of learning as well. So, this is my metaphor experiment, and I'll upload this to Foxtail and try and get this uploaded to VoiceThread, but it might go on YouTube. Thanks for listening.